Good evening, everyone. The Durham District School Board of Trustees welcomes you to the Standing Committee meeting of Monday, May the 3rd. This meeting will now come to order. We've had regrets from Trustee Barrett. We wish him well and a speedy recovery. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples in the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. I would ask if there are any declarations of interest. Seeing none, are there any changes to the agenda?
I do, Chair.
Trustee Barnes?
I'd like to propose a change under item 8B to add a letter to MPPs in regards to the article on the CBC on online learning.
So a letter to the MPPs regarding the CBC article. Thank you.
Online learning.
Are there any objections to add that to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda then is approved as amended. I see no community presentations tonight and no DDSB presentations either. So I will go directly to Director Nora Marsh for the director's update.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and through you, Chair Thatcher, happy to bring you this update at the beginning of Education Week, which is certainly an opportunity for us to acknowledge all the staff who do so much every day in terms of their commitment to quality public education and serving our students. Certainly want to acknowledge that this Education Week comes at a time when we're in the third wave of the pandemic that we have been challenged by for now over a year, and wanted to recognize the incredible efforts of all students and their families and staff in terms of the way that they're working their way through and being flexible, recognizing, of course, that the pandemic has different impact in terms of a continuum of seriousness for some families. And we remain committed to working with those families in terms of supporting them very specifically. In speaking with students last week, it was really invigorating to hear their experiences, especially these are secondary students, so beginning their fourth quadrimester. And despite it beginning with remote learning, they talked about how impressed they were with the staff, and in terms how the staff were reaching out and really checking in on their well-being and building relationships, which really has been a focus for us as a district from the very beginning of the pandemic, was to ensure that personal connections were being made in the virtual school, as well as at times when we were moving to remote learning. So it was wonderful to hear that perspective from students. Want to also acknowledge that this week is Children's Mental Health Week, and we have released resources for use within schools in terms of supporting the work that we have done throughout. But this is certainly a week to highlight the needs and to provide supports and activities related to it. Today, we received a memo from the Ministry of Education with some positive news in terms of vaccinations for educators. The focus of this wave of vaccinations is opening it up to school-based staff, including bus drivers. So the memo indicated that the provincial site would be up later this week. However, Durham Region Health Department is a little bit ahead of schedule. They don't use the public booking system, they have their own. And so Superintendent Mundy was able to communicate, she and her team, with all staff today to provide them the details around vaccination access, and that the site would be opening up later this evening. So that is certainly positive news. We know that that has been a priority of the boards, as well as for staff, for this to happen. Also wanted to flag that in terms of those who are currently in person serving students with complex special education needs, the vast majority of them have received their first vaccination. You may recall that they were prioritized by Durham Region Health initially. So there are 6 individuals as of Friday who had not, and we are working with Durham Region Health Department in terms of supporting the remaining staff. And also want to update you because the last time we met, we didn't have final numbers in terms of how many students were currently learning in person. So thanks to all the school teams in terms of the work that they did with families related to this. We have right now 93 students who are, because of their special education needs, met the criteria to be learning in person. And 69 of those students are being transported. So certainly the access for bus drivers to the vaccination will be well received. There are also 30 students through the Grove program that we're serving in person. So that translates to approximately just over 90 EAs in person, 51 teachers, and then of course all the support staff that goes along in terms of a school setting when we have students in person. So certainly want to express our ongoing appreciation to those staff who are in person, as well as those who are making things work virtually for families. Planning for next year is underway. We have concluded our secondary school registration for virtual and in person. And so we know there are 1,800 students choosing virtual for next year. So very appreciative in terms of families responding to the secondary survey. The elementary one closes tomorrow, and recognize that for both secondary and elementary, it's definitely a challenge in terms of making a decision at this point in the year. Although we do have commitments that we have to plan for in terms of staffing for the entire school system, and schools, of course, doing timetabling. And so the more information we have, the more able we are to build those timetables, understanding where we need staff and which staff we need in order to serve student needs. One of the themes that came out of this year, certainly that we heard from families who were studying in person or their children were studying in person, was the need for greater stability in terms of the in-person learning. And so by doing the registration right now, while we recognize it is a difficult time for families to necessarily know what the fall will look like, asking them to go ahead in terms of their planning based on best estimates in terms of where we'll be at, so that we can appropriately respond and have the system ready to go in September. You may recall that Durham was one of the few boards of our size or greater that was able to open on time last year. And that was due in large part because of the diligence of staff in terms of planning. Last year was different because we had additional funding made available to the board in terms of supporting flexibility through the year as well. And so in thanks to the trustees in terms of the reserve fund, as well as some other additional funding that we received, we were able to staff approximately, we hired approximately 200 additional teachers to meet the needs of the pandemic this year. So we know going into the budget process, although we have not yet received the GSNs from the government, we do know going into the budget process that we need to take into account because the number of students who are studying virtually or in person will have an impact in terms of the trustees' deliberations around different financial commitments. So we thank families for their understanding and their adaptability, and we'll have more information when this elementary registration closes tomorrow, and then we will start on the staffing and timetabling process following that at the elementary level. So that concludes my report as of tonight, and happy to accept any questions at this time.
We have a question from Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you, and through you. I appreciate everything you said about the situation we all find ourselves in. And as a parent, I share the concerns that have been expressed by many parents
in terms of making a decision in the current context. So I appreciate that we're recognizing what is essentially the plight of parents, and I understand the realities of the school board. I do think, though, that there are two things that I wonder about doing. So the first is really advocating for some funding to at least give parents an option at one stage. And I don't know if that's possible or not, Director Marsh, but it seems to me that that having no flexibility in a pandemic is a very terrifying prospect for many. And that's certainly the message that I'm getting from parents. And I'm not saying that we can do it. I'm saying, is there an avenue available to us to say, you know, our parents are really looking for at least some flexibility that we can't provide in light of the constraints that we have. So we need the ministry to step up and do something to assist us with that. So that's one thing. And then I guess the second part of that, and a question that I have, is I'm worried for parents who, you know, whose world might look very different come the fall because, for example, they're called back to work, or because there are illnesses in the family, or an inability to be vaccinated, or some, you know, something specific. So I'm just wondering if, I presume that the answer is yes to this. We will make best efforts to accommodate those sort of changing situations that are really beyond parental control, that are not necessarily something that they can foresee, at least. So I recognize the first part is a bit challenging to answer, but I'm personally, as a parent, not satisfied with how things are, and I don't blame the school board at all, because I understand where we are, but it doesn't give me a lot of solace nonetheless.
Thank you for the question, and appreciate your eloquent expression in terms of the situation that we do find ourselves in. So we will, for families where situations do change, we do our very best in terms of addressing those changes when they arise and meeting the needs at the time and being responsive. So while there might not be a large scale opportunity for those individual unique circumstances, it certainly would be something we would do our very best in terms of supporting the family. We think that so far the challenge is being felt more so by those who have chosen virtually. For those who have chosen in person this year, for the most part, it would appear that they are continuing to choose in person for next year. So it is that subset of families who chose the virtual opportunity this year, I think, that are have the most questions, and understandably so. In terms of the funding, the Ministry of Education indicated to us that we needed to plan for next year in terms of regular staffing amounts and regular funding pre-pandemic. So you may recall that we did those 200 teachers, the vast majority of the funding. Of course, the federal government provided a significant amount, the provincial government provided some, and then of course it was the reserves. So should we, and once we have a better handle on the budget, we'll have a greater sense, because if we have more returning in person, the class size, as you may recall, was the issue that we really, where we spent our additional money. So we made the commitment about a meter between students in terms of classrooms. And so that would be the area that we would want to focus on again for next year, which means we need to know what our class sizes are for next year, and then start generating what we believe the needs are, which is how we generated it last year once we made that commitment of 1 meter. So I think from a staff perspective, we've certainly indicated that we would like the GSNs so that we can analyze what's happening in terms of the funding for the board. We had been very optimistic that we would be receiving them in April because of the messaging that we received. So not sure how quickly they will be released, but certainly that would be the first piece. And then the second piece, of course, is the board may wish to pursue things as well in terms of advocating for additional pandemic-related funding for September opening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like to bring a motion
Supplemental.
in regard to that, Trustee Thatcher, but I'll certainly wait until Trustees Edwards and Barnes have an opportunity to speak as well.
I'll call on Trustee Edwards. Go ahead, Donna.
I was just going to note that as part of the grants for students needs submission by the OPSPA, by the Ontario Public School Board Association, they did put in there the need for additional funding, flexible funding to deal with COVID-related issues, because we did not know what it was going to be like. And I know that other boards have also written letters to the minister requesting that when they do put out the GSNs, that there is additional funding envelope for COVID-related funding to deal with those issues.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Trustee Barnes, go ahead, Patrice.
Thank you. I actually was just going to mention the same thing that Donna brought forward in regards to the advocacy for additional funding. But I also wanted to thank Director Marsh in regards to, I know it's difficult planning out this far as for parents, but I wanted to thank you for taking into account the students that were on-site learning or in-person learning this year, because I did get complaints from parents where their kids or their children or their students had been switched 3 times, 3 different teachers, different cohorts of mixed classes. So I know the importance of this, and I understand and totally sympathize with parents, but I do realize that the students that were in class were also facing the additional difficulties of health and safety regulations and all those pieces, and really needed that stability piece as well. So I want to thank you for taking that into consideration within the planning.
Thank you, Trustee Barnes. I also have just a little question, Director Marsh. I know I also have received many emails of late, and the primary concern, of course, is the May 4th deadline and the start for the new year. But I also have had a couple of questions regarding this year, wondering, I know we're in a lockdown until May the 20th, but wondering if there is any possibility of students returning to school this year. Has there been any discussion regarding that?
Thank you. In our meetings with the Minister of Education and the Deputy Minister, they have indicated that it's all based on what the numbers are, and that they'll seek direction from the Medical Officer of Health. So there isn't any specific criteria or number that they have shared with us in terms of if communities hit under a certain level. So we don't have that detail of information. Durham's numbers are still really high in terms of as a region. And so I do think understanding how challenging and difficult it is to be at home right now in terms of dual roles for families and everything they're balancing, it is incredibly tough. But I will also say that just prior to this closure, what we were seeing in our schools in terms of the number of COVID cases was getting very dramatically high. So have received no information in terms of an expected date or a number under which we would then number of cases, and under that number of cases, they would be reopening schools. I think everyone's really optimistic that we can try to get back into the schools in June in terms of getting community spread under control, but the numbers are still very high.
Thank you, Director. Trustee Lundquist, that your hand is still up, as I believe you would like to put a motion on the floor.
I would, Chair Thatcher. So I think something simple. I appreciate the advocacy of OPSPA, and I see no reason why we wouldn't follow suit as a school board. So I think something really simple, like I move that the DDSB trustees write to the ministry through our chair asking, sorry, this is not eloquent, I'm really sorry, write to the ministry through the chair asking the ministry to provide extra and flexible pandemic funding to allow the DDSB to more appropriately address the needs of families and students in the system.
Kathy, did you require some additional or repeating that motion, certain parts of it? I got the beginning of it. I moved that the DDSB trustees write to the ministry through the chair requesting additional pandemic funding.
Chair Thatcher, would you like,
Yes.
if you like, Executive Officer Sir Janet can share his screen so that everyone can see it.
Thank you. That would be great. Thank you, Robert. To address the needs of families. All right, thank you very much. We're looking, we have, this is a motion is on the floor. It's moved and we would like a seconder. I can see Trustee Stone. Is there any discussion around the motion? Trustee Barnes, can you see the participants? I can't see if there are any hands up at this time.
Trustee Edwards' hand is up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I agree with, I might just add that we write to the ministry, whatever, for pandemic funding for the next school year, or the 2021-22 school year. We can add that to allow, just so that.
Now, Trustee Edwards, we're having discussion at this time.
Yeah.
If you're interested in amending the motion, I'd like to hear the words "I move," and then I'll know what you're doing.
I move to add the wording after funding for the 21-22 school year.
Okay.
Trustee Lundquist's hand is up.
I would support, I would second that amendment. I support that amendment.
Okay. Go right to the ministry. Okay. So
I have a addition, Chair Thatcher. I just, instead of asking, I'd just say for advocating for the ministry, advocating.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I don't know if that
Advocating.
fits in with the flow now, advocating, to advocate, yeah.
To the ministry to provide. How's that? Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. It's moved and seconded.
We've got Trustee Crawford and Trustee Forbes' hand up.
Go ahead, Trustee Crawford.
No, I'm in favor of the letter, of course, but we have to remember we're in standing here. So is this something, this is not going to be sent by standing, it's going to go to board, correct? I'm not trying to put a hole in this, but our usual procedure is the board sends letters, even though standing could construct one.
Did you want to add that to the motion?
Well, I don't know.
Trustee
No, I'm just
Crawford?
reminding you. I'm just reminding of the process.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So I don't disagree with Trustee Crawford, but we can do what we've done in the last several times where we've done similar things, and we can hold a 2-minute meeting to pass it as a board and move forward.
Well, except that we don't have everyone here to make a change like that, so you needed everyone to agree.
Chair Thatcher.
Trustee Crawford, I just refer to our bylaws, which state trustees present and voting. So I think that we would be within our rights to do that.
Well, I'm just talking about the notice part of it. Everyone isn't here, so you can't get everyone to agree to that.
Oh, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right.
Director Marsh's hand is.
Can you help us, Nora?
Thanks. There are two suggestions I was going to make. One is what we've done when we've approved action items at standing, it automatically goes forward to board in terms of the actions of standing, and then staff then would press send on that day. If the idea is to not wait until then, I would suggest Councillor Cotter just walk you through, Chair Thatcher, in terms of what Chair Morton can do in terms of calling that special board meeting this evening.
And I think that's the whole idea, that there isn't the delay. So perhaps I can call on Councillor Cotter.
If I may, Madam Chair, can I have a point of order, please? We're voting members here. The standard procedure is that to make a change like that, you have to give notice, and you can't waive notice if everyone isn't here. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just pointing out things as they are.
So you're suggesting, Trustee Crawford, that we move ahead with the motion and then take it to our next board meeting?
Either that or call a board meeting where you can advise everybody. I know what we don't want to delay it for 2 weeks, but ordinarily standing puts something together, even if they vote in favor of it, then it goes to board.
So you're in agreement with calling an emergency or a special board meeting, but with the appropriate advance
with the
notice.
appropriate notice, and to get everyone's okay for it.
Would there be any objection from trustees for us to do that? That Trustee Crawford is suggesting that we call a special board meeting, not this evening, but just giving the appropriate notice time.
Chair Thatcher, would you like Councillor Cotter first just to tell the entire board, provide advice in terms of what the options are?
That would be great. Councillor Cotter.
Yeah, so thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. So the bylaws do allow a special board meeting to be called within 24 hours, on 24 hours notice. However, that notice period can be waived if the matter is deemed urgent. So a special board meeting could be called either by the chair of the board, Chair Morton, or by a majority of the members of the board. And the chair has the discretion to waive the 24-hour notice period. So in effect, a special board meeting could be called immediately following the standing committee. The recording secretary, Kathy Fitzpatrick, would be directed to send the notice out to all members of the meeting and the proposed start time and the agenda item for the meeting. And that would be the notice to all members of the meeting, and any materials in support, which would just be the motion from standing committee should it carry.
Councillor Cotter, I just have a question. Would that be majority or would that be all trustees present and voting? So
the special meeting can be called by the chair alone. So that's chair of the board. So should Trustee Morton want to call a special board meeting, she could do that, and she could waive the 24-hour notice period and instruct Kathy to send out that notice now. If Chair Morton's reluctant to do so, then a majority of the members of the board, and that's a majority of the members, so that would have to be 6 members of the board could call a special meeting. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to the motion. We have a motion on the floor. The motion reads that trustees write to the ministry through the chair
asking to advocate for the ministry. Do we need that again a second time? To provide extra and flexible pandemic funding for the 2021-22 school year to allow the DDSB to more appropriately address the needs of families and students in the system. Is there any further discussion around the motion?
Sorry, just point of
Chair Ford.
information. Oh,
Can you
So-
see the, Patrice, I can't see the hands. If you could direct me, that would be helpful.
Trustee Forbes and Trustee Lundquist.
I just had a question because we have two separate amendments. I mean, I know they're relatively minor, but I'm just point of information. Are we going to treat the two amendments separately or as one? And it just in relation to the Trustee Barnes's recommendation, I'm always in favor of very direct language. You know, I think it doesn't have to be aggressive, but I think direct is better, just very clear. And when we are advocating, but I think asking is just much more direct and essentially what we want, you know, where, you know, what we want the outcome to be. But that's just
So, Trustee Forbes, we can ask on the adoption of the amendment first. Did you wish to amend the motion as it is now?
no, I just wanted to point, just as a point of information, are we treating the two amendments as like because we have to vote on the amendments and then on the final motion?
right.
as amended.
So the question then will be on the adoption of the amendments. And then we can vote on the motion. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and I was
Okay,
going to
thank
speak
you.
to the First Amendment, that I prefer the original language, but it's not significantly, I just prefer direct language.
Trustee Lundquist?
Sorry, it may be helpful for me to wait to the end, so I was going to raise a point of information and ask. I will wait if that's okay. I'll take my hand down for now.
I don't know that there's another hand up at this time, so go ahead.
Yeah, Trustee Stone is up.
Okay, go ahead, Trustee Stone.
Sorry, thank you. I was just going to say that this is just the motion, so this isn't the wording that's necessarily going to go into the letter. So I
That's
just don't think it matters whether or not we're saying asking or advocate for. We know what we're doing, so it's just a part of the motion. We can change
So the motion is basically telling us that we want a letter to go to the ministry through the chair. It tells us a little why we're doing it and who is responsible for it. And so I think that we've covered everything here. So I would like to ask them, the question is on the adoption of the amendment.
Of which amendment?
The amendment to
there's two amendments. So maybe the first amendment, which is for the 2021-2022 school year.
all right, so let's say the question is on the adoption of the First Amendment. Is there anyone who is opposed to the First Amendment? I see none. So the question now is on the adoption of the Second Amendment. Are there any opposed?
I don't
the
think it was
adoption?
seconded.
Trustee Barnes moved the motion. Trustee Stone seconded the motion. So the question is on the adoption of the Second Amendment. Are there any concerns around the Second Amendment? Seeing none. So now we have a motion. It's moved and seconded.
I'm sorry, Trustee Thatcher.
Is there
I'm really
any
sorry
further? Excuse me, Trustee Lundquist.
Well, no, I actually have a procedural issue, and it's important that we address it now. So I don't take as what you just did as a vote on that amendment. I took it as as a vote for, as a discussion point. So I think if we're voting for the amendment, it needs to be made clear because I would not vote for that amendment.
Trustee Lundquist, are you talking about the second amendment?
I am, Chair Thatcher.
And so so you have an objection to the second amendment?
So I would not vote for it because I don't think it adds clarity to it. I understand Trustee Stone's point, but I just don't see it adding anything at all. So I don't see why we would change what exists. So I would vote no if we're voting for it, but I wasn't clear on whether what just happened was it meant to be a vote on that amendment. And I don't want to belabor this because I think this is actually simple, but I just am not clear on what is happening. Like if that was a discussion on the change or if it was a vote on the change.
It was a vote on the second amendment. And so I'll ask all in favor of the second amendment. That would be majority. I'd like to vote now on the motion. We have a motion that is moved and seconded. Is there any further debate? Seeing none. Could I ask if for all those in favor of the motion as it appears? We have majority. Motion is carried. Moving on then to item 8.
I'm
on your
sorry,
agenda.
may I raise a point of information, please, Chair Thatcher? So
Go ahead, Trustee Lundquist.
thank you. And I apologize for the interruption. It's on the same point. So Councillor Cotter raised 2 possibilities for us in terms of moving this forward. One was to have Chair, sorry, Carolyn, I lost your last name for a minute. Chair Morton, call a special meeting. And so I would like to ask if Chair Morton is willing to do that, because if not, then I will bring a motion to call a meeting and seek the support of majority of trustees.
And I can certainly ask Chair Morton on your behalf.
Thank you.
Carolyn, will you be calling a special board meeting?
I definitely will support having a special board meeting following standing this evening.
Thank you. And you'll ask Kathy to send out notification notice of that.
I think Kathy will be doing that very, very shortly.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to move on then to item 8 under recommended actions and call on Associate Director Jim Markowski for the school year calendar 2021-22. Go ahead, please.
For you, Chair Thatcher, the report can be found on page 1 of the package this evening. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to our proposals for the 21-22 school year calendars. The Ministry of Education requires boards to submit calendar proposals to them prior to the start of the next school year. This year, they backed the submission date for school boards to May 28th. Regulation 304 stipulates that we're required to schedule 194 school days between September 1st and June 30th. 3 days must be designated as PA days, devoted to provincial educational priorities, and we're permitted 4 further PA days for board designated activities. The remaining days are to be instructional days with up to 10 days utilized as exam days at the secondary level. This year, we're proposing to designate September 3rd, 7th, and 8th as PA days in the regular calendar. This would mean that schools following a regular calendar would commence classes on September the 9th. By front-loading these 3 PA days, we are hoping to facilitate a smooth school opening with some flex time built into our scheduling to deal with contingencies that may arise from further pandemic-related concerns. And I would echo that some of that learning has taken place this past school year. And we're also respecting high holy days and ensuring we're facilitating the time families need. We've developed 4 calendars for your review, regular calendars for elementary and secondary, as well as modified versions. Our proposed calendars have been developed in alignment to the consultative process that was outlined in the February 16th board report. And please note that within the secondary calendars, we've identified dates as placeholders for exam days. However, no decisions have been made in relation to exams, as we continue to explore a potential quadmester model for next school year. I'll refer you to the attachments within the report for your review and approval. That's the end of our report, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Trustee Stone, go ahead, Linda.
Thank you, through you, Chair. The three PA days, do you have planned already what is going to be going on with those PA days? Also, the board designated PA days are optional. I just wondered why we add them. And also, what are provincial priority days?
Thank you, and through you. So just in terms of the various questions that you've asked, Trustee Stone, we are waiting for additional guidance from the ministry in relation to the PA days and sort of what those provincial priorities will be. I know, for example, each year there's dedicated training on health and safety requirements that we would need to ensure that we're implementing. Oftentimes there's other equity-based training that we need to provide staff. In relation to the other PA days in the school calendar year, we do have other commitments, for example, through our collective agreements with our elementary schools, for example. There is designated days for report card writing days for elementary teachers, and I'm just giving an example where some of the other professional activity days are utilized to ensure that we're meeting the needs that are meeting the clauses that are outlined in our collective agreements. Just to give some examples on how it is that some of those PA days are structured.
Thank you. And so, sorry, the provincial priority days, could you just explain that again?
So similarly to the first part of my response, Trustee Stone, we receive direction from the ministry in terms of priorities, educational priorities each year that we need to be focusing on in those professional activity days. Once we get that information, we structure our provincial activity days accordingly and communicate out to the system.
Okay, thank you. Associate Director Markowski, I just have a question around the PA days on the 7th and 8th of September. And I realized that we introduced that last year to give our educators an opportunity to do a little bit of additional planning. But I did receive some feedback from educators that it might have been helpful for one of those days to happen after school was underway for a short period of time. I just wondered if you had received any feedback along those lines, and did you find it beneficial to have those 2 days together?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. So we have received a recommendation from the ministry that they are recommending that we schedule 3 professional activities prior to the start of the school year. And I think in alignment to some of the points that you just raised, I would argue, and even some of the learning that's taken place over this past school year, in order for us to effectively plan and sort of realizing some of the complexities that may come out of the pandemic as we move into the summer and sort of the evolving situation with the current structure within relation to remote learning and sort of in-person learning. I think lots of feedback that we've received is that it's been welcome that we've structured 2 PA days after the Labor Day weekend on September the 7th and 8th, which would align directly to some of the feedback that you've received, Trustee Thatcher. So we're hoping that this will allow for some additional time for us to effectively staff, timetable, and if there's any other challenges that do arise during the summer, for us to effectively plan and prepare for the school year.
Thank you very much. Trustee Lundquist, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I have just 2 very quick points. The first is I have had a couple of parents with kids in the modified program express concern about starting on time this year. And I just want to make sure that we're on track for that so we can provide those assurances to them. And then the second piece, which is kind of minor, I'm just curious about it. The long weekend February secondary holiday doesn't match up with the elementary holiday for that same family day long weekend. And I'm wondering why, or if there's a reason why we don't try to match those up in light of the fact that many parents have kids in multiple places, and maybe by 2022 they'll actually be able to leave the house for a long weekend.
So thank you, and through you, Chair, and I guess I'll start off with the comments regarding the modified calendar, Trustee Lundquist. I would say on behalf of the system, we are optimistic that we will have a successful start to our modified calendar year, in particular the elementary one that would begin classes on September 10th. You'll notice that we have set a professional activity day, on August 10th, on August the 9th. Very similar, it provides us an opportunity that if there is any required health and safety training for our modified staff, that it could be implemented on that day. I think some of the learnings that we took over this past year, some feedback that came forward too, I will share. Traditionally, usually the modified elementary calendar starts after the civic holiday in August. This year, with how the calendar weeks aligned, we want to make sure that both the elementary modified and elementary regular ended at the same time, which is why you'll notice that they began 1 week later. So everything aligns in terms of us completing the school year, both regular and modified. Other than that, we've been in consultation with both Winchester and CE Broughton and implemented any additional feedback that they've shared, and an update was provided to you in relation to some last feedback that came forward. Your second question in relation to the PA days.
Yes, just the alignment of the February. There's no alignment for elementary and secondary on the February. It's Family Day long weekend, and I'm wondering what the rationale was for that, because I know that's something that parents have raised with me in the past when there wasn't that kind of alignment.
So thank you, and through you. We do have within our collective agreement with the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario here, a local unit, that there is a designated report card writing day. And knowing that when term 2 commences, it's usually at the start of February, to ensure that we honor that day, it's booked in January. And that's sort of where you'll see that discrepancy fall between the elementary and secondary calendar. That being said, I would welcome your input, and then as we plan into future years, we could look at additional flexibility to sort of create alignment there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Trustee Edwards, go ahead, Donna.
Thank you. I know that we try to ensure that we have the same PD days with our coterminous board. I'm just wondering how many are not the same this year. I think last year was like 2 that weren't the same. Are we pretty compatible?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Trustee Edwards, we have shared our proposals with the Durham Catholic District School Board. I can't really speak in terms of what is going to be approved on their end, but once we do have information on that, I'd be happy to report back.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Associate Director Markowski, I'm looking at the conclusion. So we need a motion to recommend that the proposed school year calendars be approved, Appendix A to D. I'm looking for someone to move that motion. Thank you, Trustee Templeton, and seconded Trustee Stone. All in favor? And opposed? That carries. Moving on to item 8B, calling on Trustee Barnes regarding the letter to the MPPs regarding the CBC article and online learning. Go ahead, Trustee Forbes.
Barnes, thank you.
Barnes,
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So OPSCO and many other school boards have been advocating in regards to information that came out in a CBC article and a couple of different media articles around the idea that the ministry might be considering online learning. And so part of the advocacy is reaching out to our MPPs and sharing with them concerns that we would have around the ministry considering going to online learning. So I wanted to bring it forward here for discussion with trustees to prepare a letter to go out to our MPPs from different areas in regards to some of the challenges and some of the thoughts that we'd have in regards to switching to online learning as a permanent option for school boards. The article was in CBC, and there was one in the Toronto Star as well, and some boards have also written letters on their own in regards to reaching out to the ministry. So I wanted to put that on the table for discussion.
Trustee Edwards?
Thank you. As quoted in the CBC article, and that there is some huge concern around it's the permanent part of this article that is a bit of concern. We do support choice for parents, and we understand, as far as choice. However, this article mentions three basically forms of online learning: a full day synchronous online learning available for all students, and individual high school level classes that are taught online, and then a fully independent online learning for high school. What is missing is how this is going to be operationalized, if you wish. And there's some huge concerns around, we already know that many of our students, especially our students with special needs, cannot necessarily learn online. It's not their best mode of learning, method of learning. We also know that we, as school boards, we have consortiums that have courses that we offer for online learning that is available, and where boards can ensure that the content is culturally relevant, using culturally relevant pedagogy and local flavor as far as that's concerned, and to meet the needs of our students. So there's some concerns around the operation of this whole thing, and the other thing that is interesting that is also noted in the article is that the provincial government has already put in the budget money. And I think it's to the tune of 40,000, 40 million actually. Yeah, $40 million to make sure that this centralized online learning system happens. And boards have invested in this. So I question why we need to have some additional money put into that. So there's a whole concern about that on what this is going to mean for our students and what's in the best interest of our students. So I fully support writing a letter, because I don't think our MPPs really understand what the impact might be for localized learning, especially for some of the rural schools, etc. So I support writing a letter to our MPPs and maybe meeting with them to discuss this, because as far as I know, it also mentions that the government is going to be consulting with stakeholders, and I'm not aware of any other consultation that has happened at this point in time. I don't know of any dates that have been set up, and it concerns me, because public consultation is an important part of education.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. And I'd like to add to what was just stated by Trustee Edwards. The timing of this decision, which is mentioned in the CBC article, is terrible. Considering that we're in the midst of a pandemic, when many of our families are experiencing grave health and economic concerns, we need to first conquer COVID before any major changes can be made. Once the health threat is passed, then we need to determine the impact of online learning on our students. Evidence-based data should be gathered, studied, and guide us as we plan for the future. I'll call on Trustee Morton. Go ahead, Carolyn.
I just want to indicate that I fully support informing our MPP. I think we need to bring them on board. We need to inform them. So a letter similar to one that we wrote a couple of weeks ago would suit our purposes, and I fully support that.
Thank you very much. Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. I support it as well, but I don't think, what isn't missing isn't just how it should be operationalized. I think what is missing is any evidence of the value of this kind of education model as a permanent solution. This is worrisome when you read the CBC report and others, frankly. So to me, this is about saving money without regard to sound pedagogy. And I'm just going to say, I think it would be important to reference the Sick Kids report that came out on COVID-19 guidance during the pandemic, because in it actually said, full-time remote learning is insufficient to meet the needs of the majority of Ontario children and youth, leads to increased screen time, and is likely detrimental to overall health. So to me, we should really be sending that message clearly and firmly back. So I think that that's important, and I think it's really important that we acknowledge publicly that what is going to happen inevitably is that those dollars are going to come out of public education and in-person learning, and we should not pretend otherwise. And this should be a discussion that is held in public. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. And I'd like to add to that as well. The article mentions asynchronous learning. I have further concerns regarding inequities that could be created. Consider our special needs students. Could their needs be met with this program? And our rural students who do not have stable internet service, I think was mentioned earlier. From my personal experience, I feel the majority of students thrive when they're able to personally connect with their peers and their teachers. However, I do realize there is a place for online learning somewhere in the future. Trustee Forbes, go ahead, Darlene.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. I'll be brief because I think a lot of the points regarding equity of access, special education needs, a diversion of dollars from public education, the need for the government of Ontario, if it's making a significant change in the model of online learning, needs to do this in a public and fully transparent way. So I absolutely support writing a letter based on the information in the CBC reports and others. And, I think, as Trustee Lundquist had indicated, pointing to evidence-based, research that we've had to make these changes and pivoted quite quickly to an online learning format for obviously extraordinary reasons. And I would be very dismayed if this was used, a pandemic was used to kind of in a covert way be used to make significant changes to public education in Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Stone, go ahead, Linda.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So in the CBC article, Harvey Bishkoff, the OSSTF president, also said that online learning is useful, For example, students who live in remote areas and want access to specific courses, or students who have an anxiety disorder. Okay, so I think this is going to be something that's optional. I see this completely 100% it's going to be in the future of learning. I think a lot of parents would prefer this option. A TBO is not new to this. They've been doing it for at least 70 years. It's not like they have to relearn this or anything. I do think the timing is misplaced. We do need more of the logistics, the details, the costing, etc. I'm not against sending a letter, but I see this in the future, absolutely. So that's just my opinion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Stone. Trustee Barnes, I'm going to come back to you as you're responsible for this. And I was just wondering if you had a motion that you would like to put forward at this time.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I think there's a missing opportunity here because school boards have had to pivot. And I think it would be a valuable piece to actually talk to school boards and seeing that what works and what doesn't work, because there is an opportunity, I think, to just provide some students with that option. But I think the speed and the lack of transparency is worrying in regards to rolling this out. And I think it's also recreating something that boards already have in regards to the consortiums that offer online learning. So I think there's an opportunity for the ministry to actually do detailed consultations before going forward with that. And with that said, I just wanted to put a motion for the board to, well, I don't know if the chair does it because each of us would have our own MPPs. So I think the motion would be for, is it for the board to write to each MPP, or would it be for each trustees to contact their own MPPs? I don't know if, Nora, if you'd want to advise on that.
Go ahead, Nora.
Thank you. So you could make the motion that the chair do it on behalf of the board. Send it, all trustees would be copied, and it would be sent to all of the MPPs within the Durham region on behalf of the board.
Okay, so that motion stands as Nora has put it on the floor, that the board write a letter to all MPPs through the chair. Robert, I don't know if you want to put that word in up.
I can, yes.
To the chair, informing them of our concerns around online.
I think Nora said all MPPs in the Durham region. The board concerns
over proposed changes to online learning as detailed in articles, media articles.
All right. Is that the way you want it, Trustee Barnes? Is that complete?
Yes,
for you?
unless anybody else wants to wordsmith that a little bit more before it becomes.
Well, we have a motion moved by Trustee Barnes. We're looking for a seconder.
With second, it's Darlene Forbes.
Trustee Forbes, seconded by Trustee Forbes, that the board write a letter to all Durham Region MPPs through the chair, informing them of the board's concerns over proposed changes to online learning as detailed in media articles.
Recent, can we put recent media articles? Okay.
Thank you. All right. Is there any further debate?
Can you see our hands? Can you see our hands, Christine?
I can see some of the hands. I don't see any hands at the moment.
So you
Oh,
have Linda, Donna, and Scott.
All right. I think Scott had his hand up first. Go ahead, Scott.
Actually, Linda did have hers up first, so I'll let Linda go
You
first.
had your hand up before we put the motion out there, Scott. Go ahead, please.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say we should add 2 other people, Premier Ford and Education Minister Leckie.
Trustee Templeton, we'll be sure that they're copied. They usually are copied on those letters. We'll be sure that they're copied. Okay, and Trustee Stone?
Respectfully, Chair Thatcher.
Respectfully, yes.
Trustee Templeton is entitled to make an amendment if he so chooses.
You know, absolutely, he is entitled to do that. But what I'm saying, Trustee Lundquist, is that we usually have those people copied on all of our communication.
No, I understood what you said, Chair Thatcher, but what I'm saying is whether we usually do as a matter of practice doesn't mean that it necessarily is going to happen. So if I mean, it's entirely up to Trustee Templeton to determine if he wants to move that motion.
Would you be in favor of us just adding those as we usually do at the bottom, all of those additional names at the bottom of the letter we CC on a regular basis? Would you be in agreement with that?
I would be in agreement with that.
Appreciate that. Trustee Stone?
I was just going to say, I'm not sure that we need, as detailed in recent media articles, I would put online learning as pertaining to the TBO, including TBO, or as online learning, something about TBO, because that is what the major concern is, using TBO and making it permanent. So I think in recent media articles is too nebulous, kind of. Which articles are you talking about? You know, unless we name the articles. So I'm not sure that that end part needs to be on there. That's just my opinion.
I can't see any other hands. Am I missing anyone?
Yes, you have Darlene and Donna.
Trustee Forbes, is your hand up again for a second comment?
Yeah, well, I was just wondering, and I apologize because I know this is a group effort, but so I just wanted to be clear that we're still crafting the main motion, and I guess it's a point of information. We're still crafting the main motion and we're not working on amendment to the main motion. I'll leave it. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you.
Let me know.
And is it?
I think we were still crafting the main motion. Sorry.
Thank you, Patrice. Is that Trustee Edwards' hand up?
I'm sorry, I have a point of order because I don't know what it is actually, but we can't be crafting a main motion if it's already been seconded.
That is true. That is true. So this is an amendment to the motion. Trustee Stone, this is an amendment to the motion now? Okay, thank you. Trustee Edwards, is your hand up?
Yes, I'm fine with that amendment. I was going to add a motion for another amendment. We'll deal with this one and then we'll, because mine was, we've got to put permanent in there. The proposed changes to permanent online. And it's not changes. It's not changes to permanent online. It's as a proposed permanent online learning proposal. Well, actually it's over the permanent online learning proposal.
Okay, so let's deal with the amendment from Trustee Stone to the original motion. So the question is on the adoption of the amendment. Is there anyone who is opposed to that amendment?
Would you want a seconder since the motion was also seconded? Sorry, Chair. I'll second it if you need it.
Appreciate that. Is there anyone opposed to the amendment to the motion? All right, seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Is there any further discussion? Donna, did you want to make an amendment here?
Yes, because I'm just looking at it over the permanent online learning proposal, and that's and then it goes on, and the use of TVO, because that's what we're talking about.
All right, so we have an amendment.
You have Trustee Lundquist's hand up.
To the motion. I'm looking for a seconder. Is that why your hand is up, Trustee Lundquist?
That is why my hand is up. I think it adds a level of clarity to it. It's not just about TVO, it's about it being a permanent option. It's about all that entails as well. So I think it adds clarity that's needed.
Yes, for sure. Is there anyone who is opposed to this amendment? All right, so let's talk to the motion. We have a motion that's on the floor that the board write a letter to all Durham Region MPPs through the chair, informing them of the board's concerns over the permanent online learning proposal and the use of TVO as detailed in recent media articles. I would ask if there is anyone who is opposed to this motion. Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Robert. Much appreciated. Moving on to item 9 in the agenda. The first information item is call on one of our student trustees for the student trustee report. Which one will be beginning tonight? Is that you, Logan?
Yeah, I will be.
Thank you.
All right. Through you, Chair, this past month, the Student Senate has been working on hosting a Student Senate open house and holding a second elementary leadership conference. The Wellbeing Working Group has been working on making well-being related Instagram posts with posts like ways to get good sleeps and habits to better manage your time. The Student Voice Working Group has received data from their first thought exchange. They plan on releasing their second one for brick and mortar schools later this month. Finally, the West Regional Breakout will be putting together a video highlighting what their schools have been doing to maintain student spirit.
As the Senate, we have been heavily focused on increasing elementary engagement and building relationships with students all across the board. As a result, we have been working towards the organization of our second elementary leadership conference on Thursday, May 20th, and we have been organizing the roles of our senators and the agenda for the event. A huge shout out to Senator Michaela Marshall, who has been our incredible project coordinator. Additionally, we have been working towards our Senate open house, which will be hosted on Tuesday, May 25th, and the Senate has been preparing for the event and organizing themselves into their roles to ensure that this event has the most impact for our community. We would like to thank Ananya Mehta for being our wonderful project coordinator.
Thank you, Arpita. Students have been faced with, for the third time, a sudden shift to virtual school. It has definitely been a difficult transition, especially approaching the end of the year when motivation tends to decrease. Although students have not necessarily been appreciative of the transition, there is a strong sense of familiarity that has been developed through the past 2 virtual learning periods. That familiarity will continue helping to push our staff and students adapt and make the best of their learning experience, as they have been doing throughout the course of this school year, as well as the entire past year. We recognize May's character trait of the month, perseverance, as ever present within our DDSB staff, students, and families. and we appreciate them for their dedication that never ends. Thank you, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you, Logan, Arpita, and Aliyah. Are there any questions for our student trustees? Trustee Stone?
I'm just wondering how the elementary engagement is going. Are you getting a lot of response from students?
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. In terms of our first conference that we hosted, we had an upwards of 45 students attend per session. And post that, we had been actually using our DDSB student trustees email, the common one, to interact with other elementary students. And we can see that there has been increased engagement as well as interest for leadership opportunities in the elementary grades.
Thank you very much, Trustee Stone. Any additional questions? I'd like to thank you again then, Logan, Arpita, and Aliyah. Moving on to item 9B, Inclusive Student Services Report, calling on Superintendent Andrea McCauley.
Good evening, and through you, Chair. This evening, the report can be found starting on page 9 of tonight's agenda. The purpose of the report is to provide our Board of Trustees with information about our special education class planning for the 21-22 school year ahead. The Durham District School Board is committed to fostering success and independence for each student by providing a range of pathways, programs, opportunities, and services. The vast majority of our students with special education strengths and needs have their accommodation needs met within regular class placements. For some, accessing through specialized placement is key to supporting their individual success. We place a strong emphasis on the inclusion of our students with special needs, providing meaningful, individualized integration opportunities for our students accessing our special education programs. Together, it is our privilege to be part of the success for all students as we honor many paths to success. Our district engages in an annual process that considers shifts to be responsive at a student level, scaled to a district level, that results in adjustment in the number of special education classes in their locations. Factors specific to planning for this fall include information such as a growth in the district and impacts of growth of technology practices that include accessibility in all of our learning programs, which are included in the report. Overall, our planning changes reflect an increase in the number of students who will be able to access specialized placements for the 21-22 school year. Most notably, we have a growth in the practical learning program, mainly in secondary, providing students with programming focused on life and work skills. As the calendar recently flipped to May, our school teams with support are focused on placement decisions and transition planning with families and caregivers. One of the tools developed to assist is attached as an appendix to the report. This transition guide was written specific to considerations during COVID and the various transitions that students will be moving through. Our commitment is to continue to learn with and from our students, to refine special education programs supportive of student well-being, learning, and helping them achieve to their potential by leveraging and honoring each student's strengths, and to support any specific learning needs, understanding each of our students as individuals. This report is provided to trustees for information and happy to take any questions.
All right. So the first question comes from Trustee Stone. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. Actually, it's just more of a comment. Superintendent McCauley, I loved the report. Actually, I thought it was really comprehensive, easy to read, and you had great information in there. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you. And Trustee Edwards, go ahead, Donna.
I have a couple of questions and then a comment. One question is, do we know approximately what our SIP claims are going to be next year?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. At this time, we are predicting that to be fairly stable with a potential slight increase, with our students having an increased opportunity, particularly around practical learning. That will move some of our students who would have had intensified supports in regular class into kind of those team environments. So that will balance out, we anticipate, with the moves into the district and the increase in needs as well. But we will see, as you're aware, this year we receive funding based on an average calculation, with thanks, I think, largely in part to our SEAC advocating for that and our ability to focus on our kids in the fall. So we'll see and probably engage in conversation likewise for this fall as we transition from the pandemic as well.
And that somewhat leads to my second question, is that why is there such a huge increase? And that's like 6 classes, a lot of classes into the PLP. Are there mainstream students moving into a small class placement? And if so, why?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, if that's all right. So we have within our district a couple factors that are significantly impacting that growth. So as you referenced, we have 3 additional practical learning classes at elementary and 6 at secondary. These largely serve our students who are able to remain with us until 21. And we have that longer time to be privileged as part of their team. When we look at our students and where they're moving through the system, we had a large cohort of grade 8s this year moving to grade 9 next year, without a large similar cohort graduating at the end of their secondary experience as well. So that's created an additional cluster in secondary. As well, we have magnet partners such as Grandview. And so when we have local partners for services for kids with complex needs, as well as significant new builds. And we know that accessibility is more accessible financially in new builds than retrofit. And so we are seeing needs increase. And then we had that cohort sitting in grade 8 to grade 9 transition without a comparable graduation cohort for the 21-22 school year. And that resulted in the changes. And then when you take the 9 classes and spread them out in the board, it is a nominal change within different municipalities, but the composite is 90 additional PLP roster seats for our kids to access.
And thank you for that. And my last question is somewhat a question but a comment, but it's under section 5.2, you say no additional EAs. I'm having a difficult time understanding how we can say no additional EAs when you're actually adding a net of 7 classes, because we reduced 3 in other areas, a net of 7 classes, plus the fact that we know that we're going to have students coming into the system that definitely, due to COVID, will have increased issues around, anxiety, regulation, etc., because they haven't had that socialization that they had. Plus, just getting back into the in-class, I'm having a real difficult time. Plus, you've already reported back on the increase in mental health issues and supporting those students in the classroom. I'm having a real difficult time understanding there's no additional EA supports without taking supports away, which are already strained in our system. And so I'm questioning that statement.
If I may, through you, Chair.
Go ahead.
So thank you so much for the comments and the advocacy for kids. Wholeheartedly agree in terms of the needs across the system, both in terms of our learners and mental health and where those sit together. The team took a really good look in terms of our kids, and that's partially also why the increase in classes, because quite often the students that are moving into our self-contained classes, particularly at that high school level, if they were accessing in regular class placement, would have significant resourcing. But when we're able to bring them into programs with the wraparound care and build a community with them, that changes it a little bit. We do have the access to the Supports for Students funds, which has a bump up to our FTE this year. And then in addition to that, specific to your comments, rightfully so, about our early years learners transitioning into the system, as well as the needs. Associate Director Wright and I will be bringing commentary in camera to trustees through Education Finance to specifically address that. So really appreciate the lean into that conversation in the weeks ahead.
Thank you, Superintendent Macaulay. I actually had the same question. If we were drawing from base support to support these small classes, would there be any provision for additional EA support, do you feel, going forward, given the issues around anxiety and mental health, and possibly the academic concerns as well in our classroom, you know, just given the year that we've been dealing with. So I really would like to see more people resources. It just feels like we're cutting EAs here, and to me, they're some of our most valuable resources.
If I may, sorry, thank you for that comment. I want to reemphasize absolutely no cut at all, and we will be coming forward with we think an opportunity to address specific transition needs in the system and our students over the next 2 years through the Ed Finance conversation.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to that.
I'm just going to add to Superintendent Macaulay, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Thatcher, just to really emphasize. So this report sits independent from Ed Finance, where we have identified as a C, whatever draft we bring to trustees for your consideration, that next year is not regular. So we recognize we've got the pandemic in terms of health and safety management from physical safety, but we've also talked at length about the needs that the students will have as they re-enter the system, exactly the way that you and Trustee Edwards have articulated it. So I think you will see in the Ed Finance budget that we bring forward a reflection of that kind of thinking.
Thank you so much, Director Marsh. I'll go to Trustee Morton. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. My question was also going to be about an increase of 7 classrooms, but not an increase in EAs. But I think that Superintendent Macaulay has heard our concerns, and I think Director Marsh has heard our concerns. So we hope that you will keep that in the back of your mind as our planning for next year continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Morton. Trustee Forbes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I guess I was just wondering about the reduction of the school support program classes and the self-regulation program. So, I mean, I know that self-reg program, I think it's been a little bit difficult since it was implemented. I could be wrong, and I don't want to speak for you, Superintendent Macaulay. So I guess I just get a little, and same with the school support program, that is, I know it's kind of intensive for building executive functioning skills and some other skills. And I'm thinking that after the disrupted learning experiences of kids as students who may utilize these programs, I'm just wondering what the, supports are going to be available if these programs go away.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you for your comments. Specific, if I can break them apart and do them separately for that. So the first is the self-reg, and I think you're very fair in your comments in terms of the design and intention in terms of the outcomes. So for the background of our trustees, the self-regulation class was a re-imaging of the previous behavior programs where we heard from students in terms of negative labels in terms of the program, as well as our clinical backgrounds and our team saying, come younger for early intervention. And that's where you saw a late elementary program replaced with a grade 2-3 program with the idea and concept that students would come into the program for grade 2 as a regional class, where their academics would sit beside self-regulation at a more intensive level than in regular class. And then throughout grade 3, students would have integration opportunities back to home school while they rounded out in the program, and then would make their pathway forward from grade 4. It is really challenging for 7 and 8-year-olds to switch schools when we know that community and peer relationships and how those develop through primary are so important. As well, when we look at the needs of the students, we do have a pressure point around kids with higher behavioral needs and dysregulation that also crosses over into mental health. So we're in conversations with some of our growth partners into how do we look at that in an intensive way. And so then when we were moving from this year into next year, we do currently have 2 self-regulation classes open. We looked at all of the individual students, and we want to make sure that we're not embedding too many transitions for kids. So the 1 program continues for next year. When we looked at the student needs within the 2nd class, they leaned more academic than self-regulation. So the school's actually going from having a self-regulation class to having a school support class, and the kids have all been offered placements in that program at that school. So no switch, and more tailored to their needs. And then what I've asked is for our psychological services team as lead to take a look at the regulation needs of our students and put forward another proposal for how we continue to grow forward as we learn more, know more well-being and mental health, because we do recognize that we still have some students that we've got an opportunity for. In terms of the school support program class, you are correct, executive functioning, literacy, numeracy, a class that's focused in partial integration. And so really meant as an intervention rather than a destination pathway. We know certain programs such as developmental tend to be longer term pathways for our kids. School support program was certainly designed as an intervention and focused. What we've found is through the pandemic, because it has brought a few gifts as well as some immense challenges highlighted tonight, is that as we've brought up the technological skills in our classrooms as a base footprint, a lot of our kids that were coming into SSP to learn around their SIA equipment and technology needs are now having their needs met in the mainstream and their regular classes. And as we know more about well-being as a footprint for all learners, we're also seeing that kids don't need to come into that intensive setting in order to have those wraparound conversations in their regular class setting. And so as we commit to least restrictive environment for our kids, at the schools impacted, we were able to program for the kids and move them into regular class settings and or other programs if their needs were intensive. So again, just that reflection of where kids are in each year and wanting to get them programs to support their success. Really appreciate the questions and insights into the kids as well.
Thank you, Superintendent McCauley. I'd like to call on Trustee Barnes. Go ahead, Patrice.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent McCauley. I think a lot of my questions were answered. I just wanted to make comments about, again, students that are returning, especially our youngest ones, from students that have been home that are coming into JK and SK, and students that were in SK and JK that have been home and not used to a schedule going into grade 1. So I'm glad that we're looking and considering those pieces, because I think we have known historically that is the heaviest part that we need interventions in, and I'm glad that we are focusing on looking at that into next year and the year after. So thank you for those pieces, and I look forward to the further discussion around how we're going to support our students. The other pieces I wanted to thank you. This report was very good and very comprehensive, and I'm just wondering, this particular report, do we have something similar that goes out to parents of students with special needs? Because this was so good, like you could actually see what's coming, how do you advocate, where are the points. So I'm wondering if we might consider something that parents of this comprehensive that parents could have that would sort of help them navigate the next steps and the different pieces for advocating for their child in our system, because this was put together really well.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, if that's all right. Thank you so much for the feedback on that. Boards are required to put forth a special education plan. And our board's commitment is we generally publish on an annual cycle, even though required on a biannual, just to keep it current. But we do acknowledge that it can be fairly thick, which takes away from the accessibility. And that's something that we seek feedback from SEAC on an annual basis. The two documents that form Appendix C and D are on the board-facing website and available for parents in a different format, just to get that information. Earlier this year, we brought you Many Paths to Success, which is going to go under another revision as we learn more about identity and mattering being at the front end of intervention. So lots of separate documents, and one of the conversations our team has been having and would like feedback on is being comprehensive without being cumbersome for our families, and trying to hit that sweet spot where information's available, but that support's there to guide through, either from a community partner or our staff or the school staff. So we're always trying to make adjustments, comprehensive, not cumbersome. I think we're still a little cumbersome and are working on that. So any feedback on that, happy to take from trustees as well, as partners such as SEAC.
Thank you. As a parent, I would say one of the things that might be good to look at is stages, because if you're thinking about from junior kindergarten to grade 3, and then from grade 4 to grade 6, and then you go from that, because I, as a parent, that would be my focus. So that would be the most important part for me. If I could look at something that's talking about my particular student, and with all those pieces, so whether it is the special education or the transition pieces or those other pieces, I think that there would be value in being comprehensive without being cumbersome, because I don't have to flip through all that other stuff. So I think that might be something to think about in regards to, because as parents, you think about it, you're kind of laser focused on just what affects you, right? And then you look at next steps. So I think that's one of the things that you could probably think about. Thank you very much again.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. And I'll call on Trustee Stone. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions, Superintendent McCauley. One is, I just wondered how long, I see here that that one of the regulations states that I think it through that principal can recommend that an exceptional pupil who is 21 years of age or older remain in a secondary day school program. I'm just wondering, one of my questions is for how long after the age of 21, and also wondering about the ABA training. Do we continue to do that? How many do we train? And is it still one of the main therapies, and is it working well?
So thank you, and through you, Chair. So the two questions, the first one in terms of our students to 21. So the board recently participated. This was plus 1 year of a 3-year project around transitions for students with intellectual disabilities. And it's really allowed us to focus in on multi-year transitions and program pathways to adults. So what happens as our kids move through secondary and plan for either adult programs, services, or direct workplace. So at this time, we do transition our students at that age 21, but we are trying to get more and more thoughtful and embedded in the process of integration transition planning. It is rare for a student in the GTA. The GTA boards tend to be very consistent on that being a key transition point, but we don't want it to come up quickly or without planning. And so that's where investment really is in the what happens before the before. In getting kids into really good pathways. So in general, we do not extend for our students into a second year within the year that they turn 21. And then your other question around ABA. So we're really we absolutely do. And we have our autism resource team that leads training in that area, as well as our speech team comes with expertise around the communication pieces that are often part of ABA as well. And then we have board certified behavior analysts within our site services team. So we've tried to diversify to support our kids with ABA principles and learning. Right now, there's some movement provincially around changes to the Ontario Autism Program, which includes some regulations and a look at that. And so we keep looking forward to how that's being implemented, but definitely in support of ABA practices for our kids. That is our current philosophy and underpinning for our kids with ASD. And then we know it's necessary for some, good for quite a few other students. And that includes classroom embedded programming, as well as some after school programming implemented through special after school skills funding that we receive specific to supporting our kids with autism spectrum disorder. So yes to in the day and night, but then there's also some pieces moving around professional regulations and access to services for our kids that may hold 1 foot in board programs and 1 foot in therapy and how they move through that. We're still looking for those big pieces to land provincially.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I see Trustee Forbes has a question, I believe.
Sorry, just one really brief comment picking up on a thread that Trustee Barnes had said, was that I think it is really important that recognizing, and I know that Superintendent Macaulay, I know that you recognize this, but as we have students with exceptional needs, parents are often bombarded. They have many appointments and different places to go and different bits of information that are thrown at them. But so it's sometimes, I think, having a paper handed to you or having it in an email or text message, I don't know, like a link, and maybe all of the above. If sometimes, you know, it takes a couple of times for people to even recognize that the information's been given to them. I know that was my case. So if there's any direct mode of sharing, I think, especially at the school level, I think that's really invaluable. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
And thank you, Superintendent Macaulay. I think we've exhausted all of the questions for you now.
Thank you so much.
Moving on to 9C and calling on Superintendent Heather Mundy for her presentation around Ignite Accessibility Annual Report.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. I'm pleased actually tonight to introduce the co-chairs of the Accessibility Advisory Working Group, Lisa Coppin, Senior Manager of Human Resource Services, and Michelle Crawford-Eade, Special Education Officer, who will share the report.
Thank you, Heather, and good evening, everyone. And through you, Chair Thatcher. Found on page 53 of your package is our board report. And on page 56, we're sharing our annual status report as part of our DDSB Igniting Accessibility Multi-Year Plan. So this annual report has certainly been a collaborative effort as we've worked with various departments in developing and updating this report. Another initiative for our working group will be to update the Igniting Accessibility Multi-Year Plan. And this work we will commence in the fall of 2021. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, who will provide you with some highlights from our annual status report this evening.
Thank you, and good evening through you, Chair. The Igniting Accessibility Durham District School Board Annual Status Report 2021 is based on the 2020 deliverables to meet the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act standards and compliance requirements. This year, the annual status report looks different because it is in an accessible format that will be included on our website. The annual status report, as in previous years, outlines deliverables and outcomes to identify, remove, and prevent barriers to improve opportunities for peoples with disabilities. The working group focused on reporting on the key deliverables because of the uniqueness of the current year, meeting the standards as embedded in the work we do as an organization, and the development of the draft human rights policy and related new draft human rights accommodation procedures. Key to the working group's report is the work done by our facility services, transportation, and website development staff and teams. These are highlighted in detail in the report. Moving forward, as Lisa mentioned, in the fall of 2021, the working group will be consulting to update the DDSB Igniting Accessibility Multi-Year Plan. I will now turn it back to Superintendent Mundy. Thank you.
Thank you, and we're happy to take any comments or questions.
Well, I just have a comment and a question, Superintendent Mundy, and it's with regards to the equity piece. And I'm looking at the human rights training for education professionals, which looks like an amazing course that's offered through Osgoode Hall. And I absolutely fully support professional development and always have. But I did notice that there were only 8 people who are attending the 4-day session and 1 attending the 5-day session. And I was just wondering if there was some provision for their learning to be shared with other people around the board. Just sounds like there'll be so much information that we can share there. Just wondering if you had something in mind for that.
Certainly, I can speak briefly. So we did have a small group attend that. This is the second group that we've had attend the Osgoode sessions. So we are starting to build that within the system. I think too that through the human rights policy, there will be a lot of professional development that will support the system. And certainly through the equity and the Indigenous departments, we are developing other professional learning with the pause this year and around the pandemic. It has been difficult to move some of those forward, but we are beginning to look at that because we know the importance of that work. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll call on Trustee Stone. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. Just a comment on the report. I really liked it as this report as well. I liked how succinct it was. I liked how you put out the lead department. And so you explained who was involved and what they did and things like that. So just complimenting on you that on the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Trustee Barnes, go ahead, Patrice.
Thank you. I will also mention that, it was easy to read and it was not tedious to get through. So I really appreciated that. The question I have is there is a section that speaks to the mandatory training for accessibility. And I'm just wondering if there will be that around the human rights portion of it as well. I know sometimes there's a little problem with what's mandatory and what's not. So I'm just wondering if that will be part of that.
Thank you. And through your chair, you're right. There is mandatory training that's required for employees, but there also is mandatory training that as a board, we will feel is important in moving forward. And so I think that's where we will look to some of the human rights components and the accommodation pieces and ensure that that is completed for all staff.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions for Trustee Mundy and Lisa and Ms. Crawfordy, thank you very much. So moving on in the agenda to item 10, committee reports, I'd like to call on Trustee Stone for the Governance Ad Hoc Committee meeting minutes.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, those meeting minutes can be found on pages 68 to 70. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Trustee Barnes for the Equity and Diversity Ad Hoc Committee meeting report.
Thank you. The report can be found on page 71 to 74. And I just want to point out for trustees the 2 items. One was the discussion, the robust discussion around the Black Studies course. We got a fair bit of feedback from our community in regards to that course because the TDSB launched their anti-racism course for their grade 12. And so the discussion around the table, and it's noted in the minutes, was about how to sustain our Black Studies course and how to make them sustainable within our high schools. We've had the course now for 4 years, and we went from 2 courses to 12 courses. But the discussion is around how to make it sustainable and to spread it out more in all our high schools. So there was a good discussions around those, and also how to expand it probably to our grade 9s, as it's only right now in our higher grades for high school. So it was one, and making the parents aware that that course does exist, because it's one of the big asks when you do reach out to the community in regards to Black studies and Black history. The other piece is, our DBEN, our Black Educators Network, is partnering with another organization called Side by Side Family Services, and they're working in regards to a student family advocate that would help Black parents navigate the school system, predominantly in the younger grades, so grade 1 to 6. So details of those will be coming forward, but you can find more details of that in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Barnes. And moving on then, just to mention that we do have one letter that's in the area under correspondence. And as there is no further business, and before I turn this over to Chair Morton, I would like to adjourn this portion of the meeting.
So one meeting is adjourned, and we are wasting no time in moving into our second meeting. We are calling a special board meeting because we have a need to act, and we feel that it's an urgent need to act on 2 resolutions which were proposed at our standing meeting. All trustees should have received from Kathy Fitzpatrick an agenda. Hopefully you have that agenda in front of you. I will call this meeting to order. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Looking at our agenda, could I have a motion to approve that agenda? Thank you, Trustee Templeton, seconded by Trustee Thatcher. All those in favor? Thank you. We have 2 recommended actions in front of us. I am going to go to Vice Chair Thatcher to bring forth the first recommended action.
Our first motion that was moved by Trustee Lundquist. I move that trustees write to the ministry through the chair to advocate for the ministry to provide extra and flexible pandemic funding for the 2021-2022 school year to allow the DDSB to more appropriately address the needs of families and students in the system.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. I'm going to go to Trustee Lundquist and ask her if she is willing to second that motion.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing no comments, then I will ask you to go to reactions. If you support this motion, I would like you to indicate by giving me that green check mark to say that you are in favor. Thank you kindly. That was very obviously much support for that letter. Thank you. Moving on to the second recommendation. Christine Thatcher.
We have a second motion that was moved by Trustee Patrice Barnes, that the board write a letter to all Durham Region MPPs through the chair, informing them of the board's concerns over the permanent online learning proposal and the use of TFO as detailed in recent media articles.
Thank you. I will go to Trustee Barnes and ask her if she is willing to second that motion. Thank you, Trustee Barnes. Comments or questions regarding this motion? Then I ask you again to go to your reactions. That green check mark will tell us that you are in favor of that motion. Thank you. Again, we have absolutely wonderful support. So now I will be talking to Robert Zerjanik and saying to him, I think you and I have got our work cut out for us this week. I expect, Rob, that you're going to be on board with me in doing that. Would you like to comment, Rob?
Nothing further to add.
Thank you, everybody. If there is no further business, I will call this meeting adjourned. Good evening.